as I continue my own journey, I just see that to work for the conservation, preservation, and recognition of the inherent and eternal value of the natural world is one of the most important things I think we can be about today, because it is also having such an onslaught in so many ways. Personally, I remember this Jim said, I'm a Dominican Sister from Adrian, Michigan, and when I went into the study of law, it really was out of a background of commitment to civil and human rights. And my first work out of law school was in the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, Voting Rights Enforcement. And I went to law school in order to represent what I thought were the underrepresented and the voiceless. And my journey has continued to just keep opening up so that I now understand. I still remember the place where I was driving in North Carolina in 1989, listening to a tape of Thomas Berry, who's been deeply influenced the work of our center. And he was then talking about, earth rights. Someone had given me this little cassette. Those were the days of cassettes. And, what I remember is, he said, I suspect that if we had an earth governance and every species got to vote, they would probably vote the human off the planet. Yes. That was stunning to me. I still remember, I went, because I had never thought about it. I had never thought about all of the ecosystems and species and water that sustain us. And so my work, I can still say that was what started opening up my understanding of the rights of nature, what we now call rights of nature. So let me just say that there are brochures for our center, which is a mouthful, the Center for Earth Jurisprudence. And let me just say, as I say in my classes for my students, jurisprudence comes from the Latin, juris meaning law, prudentia meaning wisdom. It's supposed to be the philosophy of law. How stunning to think that we actually have a tradition where one would think about and then allegedly implement a philosophy of law of what one ought to do. Believe me, law schools don't teach that today. Most few and far between do you find law schools that actually teach jurisprudence or students that can say the word and know what it means. The work of the Center for Earth Jurisprudence is not coming out of a particular theological perspective, but I would say we come out of a spiritual perspective, which is the reverence for life. And what interests me as I work with the rights of nature and understanding the value, it takes me back in my own religious tradition to what we used to call sacramentals. The sacramentals are those which help us to understand the reality of the sacred. And in my tradition, as a Roman Catholic, we have sacraments and we use water. We use water in many times. And how can we, for example, baptize with what that is supposed to mean ritually and symbolically with water that is filled with nitrates and pollution? I mean, it's no longer, it has its own essence. Or the whole thing of soil. I mean, and the whole Ash Wednesday tradition of knowing that we come from the earth and we return to the earth. And candles, imaging of the fire and the energy of the sun. The wind, which many Christian and other religious traditions has a sense of spirit and breath, and ruah, refreshing. And this is, Thomas Aquinas, back in the 14th century, said that in that, and then it is a religious, specifically Christian religious tradition, and said there that there are two books of Revelation in his era. One is the scriptures and one is the natural world. And he said nature came first. So basically, all ecosystems and species have inherent rights to exist, thrive, and evolve. And that inherent right is really important because when we do this work of rights of nature, or just think of protecting the native plants, for example, we're not actually giving rights to those entities. What we're doing is we're recognizing that they already exist. And then we're trying to dig into our tool chest to see how do we legally protect them. And that's a big difference. At least it's a big difference to me. So that's why we talk about that inherent right to exist. Came from the same source where we get our rights to exist in the human world. And then they inspire us. I mean, I've been moving along in this rights of nature and Earth Jurisprudence piece, and I decided that I really want to bring in the RITES part of this. Because for me, the power of nature, whether it's water, whether it's the springs, whether it's incredible fields of plants that are blooming, or it's our longleaf pine, or you pick your favorite place, whether it's the ocean. Many of us go to some place in the natural world to just be, to find our own I am, and pull that forward. And so often it's healing, it's transformative, but there is a power there. I think if we open ourselves to it, that carries huge capacity for a spiritual experience or some kind of inner affirmation. And I think all of us need to find those ways to reclaim it and not be embarrassed to talk about it, because what we are up against in our economic and legal structures, we will never be able, I think, to challenge and overcome them unless we are deeply rooted from that inner space.